It has recently come to my attention that the people who are giving this show positive praise and feedback um, are essentially deluding themselves. Um, they're deluding, yeah. They're nothing. There is nothing good about this show. It has no positive attributes in terms of actually being any type of symbolism reminding you or reminiscent of One Piece. It's incredibly annoying exactly how bad the show desperately tries to basically clean up the ashes that it has burned, that is the story of One Piece, in order to try and convey and to push along their story. When, again, and as I have to keep stressing this, the shit just doesn't make any sense. They're not connecting anything on an actual good narrative level. It's just the fact that things are supposed to happen this way, so they just happen. But rather than explain it the same way that the actual original source material does explain it, they go in this roundabout way of doing everything they can to be different from the source material, and then they still have the characters wind up in the same scenario. But again, because of their lack of explanation, it doesn't justify the meaning behind anything and everything that they do. So I have to keep saying this because it's like it becomes more and more apparent in every fucking episode that they just keep constantly contradicting themselves. They keep going against everything it is that they've previously stated, and the only reason things actually function correctly is because I know how the story of One Piece actually goes. So upon looking at this, it just doesn't make any sense. So with the sixth episode, it opened up with essentially Zoro being hurt. And now you have Luffy kind of just dead in the water because the fact that Zoro was hurt is something that's shaking him. But again, it's one of those things where it's like character dynamic. This doesn't really work, as you have Luffy essentially state and claim that he didn't think Zoro would lose. He doesn't believe in stopping anyone from fulfilling their dream, and he already knew that the fight was to the death. So being the character that he is, and then one of the things that's actually a main staple of Luffy's character within the series of One Piece, is that he's someone who adamantly, I mean adamantly, is okay with facing death if it means he can accomplish if it means that he was still on the path of accomplishing his dream. He never goes against that. He never goes against that. There's multiple times in One Piece where he literally accepts his fate if he believes that this is his fate, but he still has a smile on his face, considering the fact that at no point in time did he compromise his dream or who he was, despite whatever it led to. So taking that aspect away from that character it's a major disservice to the character, because again, it pushes along a huge arc of dynamics that come with the other surrounding characters and why they choose to follow and help Luffy, as well as like his attitude towards stuff when it comes to, I don't care what you do to me as long as you don't mess with my friends. And then upon stuff happening to his friends and they seeing him respond in the way that he responds and the actions that he take, that again justifies and solidifies their relationship with him and why they choose to actively serve under him and follow him as a captain. So all of that being said, this show has done everything that they can to basically destroy that concept because they failed to give those characters the dynamic that they deserved in order to justify their relationship to Luffy. So, upon looking at this, you have these characters essentially be incredibly close, but they gave no reason as to why they're close. They just kind of had a couple of lines of dialogue, and yet now all of a sudden these people know each other inside and out. And it just does not work. Because again, you're putting the cart before the horse. You miss everything that would innate for you to you missed everything that would allow you to believe that these characters would keep such a strong bond. And you can tell it's from the rushed writing styles that they have, which also is bad because it's like they're rushing everything, yet the pacing is slowed down to a crawl, to where just the smallest minimalistics of things, which is basically conveyed perfectly in the source material and they get over with really fast, is just brought to a standstill in order for this show to try and explain or express how I believe this moment is special, despite the fact that this moment isn't necessary to the characters. It's typical writing tropes that you would see in Western writings and TV shows and whatnot. You know, the hero being taken back because of a great loss, or he got his ass whooped at one point in time, then only for him to come back after a pep talk, and then he goes and wins. It's shit that you see all the time. But you're adapting something that is of an Eastern writing nomenclature, and because of that, you don't have the main character take losses like that. And one of the joys of the character is, despite his lack of intelligence and a lot of the dumb stuff that he says and he does, he still inspires people who are a lot stronger than him, smarter than him, or even better suited than him to do certain actions, to literally follow him and let him do what he wants to do. So again, taking all of that away from what it is as One Piece is just ultimately killing its soul, because you're not giving that main character that you allow to just do and say whatever and consider him an idiot, yet you understand why everyone is willing to follow him, and these people are also willing to die for him. For this show, you just have characters say that, but it doesn't mean anything because nothing was done to justify said statement. They just said it. And then it's easy for essentially Netflix and dumb and bad One Piece fans to allow this to happen because they understand the course of action. Netflix stands, of course, because of the fact that they're used to this bad writing, as you see shit like this within the Wednesday show, which was given high praise, but narratively that show was really bad. And then for like One Piece fans that just generally want any type of acceptance whatsoever, they're more so caught up within the glitz and the glamour, as it focuses on highlighted moments within One Piece, but because it doesn't actually bridge it together narratively or correctly, you could get lost in that subtext where essentially it's like, yeah, this doesn't make sense why these characters would have this conversation, but I know these characters are supposed to go here. So having this conversation abruptly end just so they can wind up here doesn't make any sense, but I really want to see them go here so they can do the thing and whatever. And it's just a terrible way of looking at a series, especially one that essentially was promoted and equated to have been written by a big fan and then checked and double checked by the actual creator. It's obviously clearly marketing and just such an abhorrent way of handling this series. But going back to like I was saying, you have this abundance of basically Nami and Usopp worried about Zoro and his injury from fighting Mihawk, who, remember from the last episode, just abruptly left even though he was sent there to go capture Luffy. And then they're basically dead in the water, and you kind of have a situation where they're desperately needing a doctor, and Luffy desperately trying to go and find a doctor. And one of the things that kind of messes up this this motif of what they got going on within the series is that we're seeing a moment in which they desperately need a doctor, right? And because of the fact that they desperately need a doctor, you would think that the aftermath of what it is that they got going on, before they even attempt to go into the Grand Line, Luffy or someone else would probably prompt for them to get a doctor. Now, within the regular source material, that doesn't happen until later, and it justifies that need for a doctor, even though on this in this iteration, they literally have a huge moment where not having a doctor could have led to someone dying. So you see how that doesn't really work out in the long run of what it is that this show is trying to do. But again, far be it for me to tell you exactly how terrible of a writer you are when you're a really bad writer. But then you also have the main character, Luffy, who essentially is a very staunch individual in terms of letting people follow their own dreams and believing in themselves, essentially kind of flip-flopping on that statement and that concept. Now, this is the worst aspect of this episode, considering the fact that Monkey D. Luffy is someone as a character within the source material that never does anything like this. It's a core element to his character, as I previously stated, in terms of like when you have moments of people literally about to kill him and he faces that moment with a smile on his face, which draws the ire of actually a lot of other people and characters. So having him essentially get an emotional shock just from seeing someone essentially do something that he himself would even gladly do doesn't make any sense. Now, within the original source material, you kind of had this situation be covered by the fact that Zoro and Usopp left, and then that way Zoro was able to get bandaged up and whatever, but it's like not that well done while they were going to look for Nami. But Luffy, on the other hand, was worried about other stuff because he believed that they would be fine. So there was no need to basically waste time by having a lull of the series by essentially having the main character just be kind of shooken over the fact that, well, his first mate is kind of injured right now, really hurt, and I guess you can blame it being his fault because he didn't step in to change a fight or anything like that. When again, you have a multitude of people essentially kind of brandishing Luffy with the idea of what it is that the captain is supposed to do, when that also is a statement or a concept that needs to be brought up right now, considering the fact that nothing that Zoro did or nothing that Luffy did was, one, out of character as far as the source material is concerned, or two, anything that would brandish a negative attitude towards, considering the fact that it's something that both of them would be willing to do and already talked about wanting to do. Luffy is someone who doesn't get in the way of other people's dreams. Zoro is someone who's willing to die to try and become the world's strongest swordsman. These things are like, it should have been more of a focus on Nami in terms of her trying to understand what it was that was going on. You already had it to where she was willing to stick around in order to fucking see the fight through anyway. So then it should have been more of a confirmation that basically would have led into her having such a deciding factor in terms of feeling betrayed, like feeling sad about betraying them or anything like that later on, because that was going to happen. And it just would have added more depth because you didn't get any of the service that showed how close that they gotten throughout this series because you just fumbled about rushing through a whole bunch of shit. So you've had them like chuckle and laugh and whatnot a couple of times, but you never really showcased them like spending days on end on the boat, getting to know each other, having fun, shit that the anime just kind of let happen in passing, you know, finding out more about one another through the perilous adventures and the situations that they were in, or being there for one another when the shit actually counted during the certain fights that they had up until that point before Nami betrays them, thus making it, when she did betray them, all the more worse. So when essentially she was confronting both Usopp and Zoro, you had those issues going on with her character, as she didn't want them dead, but she wanted them to leave her alone so she could just get back to doing what she was doing. But again, the series has compromised that. So by not establishing or justifying their relationship, you've compromised that entire concept, which makes everything else that's going to happen hereafter really fucking stupid. So it's abhorrently bad to have it to where she's constantly berating Luffy for not making a staunch decision in terms of intervening or stopping Zoro or anything like that, but he also didn't have the opposition to do anything that would basically showcase exactly what kind of person he is. Now again, in the source material, one of the first introductions Nami has to Luffy is that concept, which essentially kind of stills in her what kind of person he is. And that came in the form of when they was with Buggy, to which he was like, yeah, kill Luffy. And she was like, well, we don't gotta kill him. She's like planning on just all of them partying and drinking them under the table so she can rob them blind. And then Buggy, being the way that he was like, this ain't a fucking game. Like, kill him. I told you to. If you want to join my crew, you do what I say. Kill him or I'll kill you. And then with Luffy, it was like, yeah, you better listen to him. And it was like, this shit is real. We're pirates. And it was like, you a thief. And it was like, yeah, this shit's real. And it was like, and I'm willing to, like, I'll die not compromising myself. And it was like, I'm about that life. And it's like, if you want to play pirate, you got to understand what that means. So it's like, this shit is serious. And that is things that basically lead and help with these characters and whatnot in the grand scheme. But because the series chose not to develop them that way, it ultimately keeps failing every chance that it gets in terms of actually highlighting or having or even establishing this concept. So having Nami berate Luffy over the fact that, well, Zoro was not really injured, we don't have a doctor, and you basically made a bad decision as a captain, and it not being met with any type of opposition is dumb, because it doesn't help Luffy's characters or Luffy's stance, in what it is that happened and like how he felt and he understood Zoro basically better than Nami ever could, because it was something that was like, yeah, we're willing to die for our dreams. So then later when the conversation about dreams even comes up, it doesn't really help in the mindset of it being another way of trying to convince Nami or showcasing to her what it is that he means when he's like, I'm totally fine or cool with someone dying for their dream. Like it's something that he wanted to do. But the only line that they gave that basically could have allowed that dialogue to transition correctly was when he was like, I can't get in the way of someone's dream, Nami. And he was like, and you must have had a dream. And she was like, well, right now I don't want Zoro to die. And he was like, nah, I mean something you want. Like, there got to be something out there that you want. And then her going against, well, sometimes people don't get what they want. Sometimes you got to crush your dreams because of the reality. And then you just should have had Luffy follow up with that. And it's like, I don't believe that. And it's like, and I refuse to live my life that way. And again, it just be something that like inspires Nami, because it's like, God, like, how can you just be so positive about everything and anything despite not knowing what the future may bring? And it's like, that's just who I am. And then that again leads into, that would have helped develop more as to why she would respect and like Luffy for later on. But you completely fucked that over because you tried to make it seem like Nami was in the right of the conversation and Luffy was basically being a fucking idiot. And that did not work. It just did not work. So then you essentially have it to where Zeph comes over and he does like an old fisherman's secret remedy to heal somebody. And they stitched up Zoro. He stitched up Zoro and laid fish over his chest, and it was like, all right, whatever. And then essentially you had it to where he was like, he got 1 foot in the grave and one foot in the other world, 1 foot in ours. You need to talk to him in order for him to be tethered back to this world. And it's like, what is this goofy shit that you got going on? This sounds like the dumbest shit that came out of Naruto. It's like, what the fuck does that even mean? And having it to where even during the conversation with Nami and Luffy, where he was like, I seriously thought he could win. That actually should have been another main staple as to justifying why Luffy doesn't feel bad about what happened with Zoro. And it was like, my money was on Zoro. Like, why would I believe he could lose? Like, it's something that he's wanted, something that he's working for, something that happened. It was like, but he came up short. And it was like, them's the breaks. But hey, he did it though. It's like, can't nobody take that away from him. And it's like, and now he's still alive. So hey, and then just have Luffy go when he wakes up, when he survived, despite everyone else talking or saying things or anything like that. Just have him being like, hey, if he don't make it, and Luffy just kind of cutting them off and being like, no, when he makes it. And that just would have been another dope ass way of showcasing Luffy's character in terms of how it is that he goes about believing in them. But for some reason, this series tries to hyper emphasize dreams rather than the belief or the companionship and the camaraderie that these characters are supposed to have, but instead just makes it all about their dreams and their wishes. And then it just comes across as really fucking stupid. So then having it to where, like, they're constantly trying to talk to Zoro and whatnot, they do something incredibly stupid that was like really bad fan service, because they had Nami read Nolan the Liar story to Zoro while he was unconscious. They're on the merry-go. And this is actually a bad idea because they were on the merry-go and they were reading the story of Nolan the Liar. Nolan the Liar is a story from the North Blue. It's not from the East Blue. And that's something that's actually brought up by Sanji later on when they mention Nolan the Liar after they go their ways within the Grand Line. And this shit is brought up like way fucking after Alabasta. So again, really fucking stupid that they would have that being done. But again, fan service. So you sit there and look at it, and if you're stupid, you'd be like, oh my God. But continuity wise, doesn't make any fucking sense. But hey, whatever. At the end of the series, at the end of each episode, they keep trying to show a map of the East Blue that doesn't make any fucking sense, because the Barati is literally a restaurant that travels so that they can feed anybody, regardless of what type of food or what situation they might be. Pirate, Navy, it doesn't matter. So it's a traveling restaurant. So it's not stationed in one particular area, as well as like a multitude of the islands that they have are shit that basically are brought on by specials within the One Piece, but they're specials that take place in the Grand Line. So equally stupid. But hey, it's just not like I'm a fan. Fucking idiots. But oh my goodness. So then you have that conversation, and then you essentially have Sanji break down his backstory, and something that's kind of unwarranted, but they did it anyway. And another major factor that kind of helps Luffy as a really good leader and a really good friend within the original source material is the fact that throughout One Piece, he's probably heard a few characters' actual backstories. not everyone in his crew, he knows the extent of what it is that they've went through in life. And actually, even though I say a few, I really don't even know if he knows that many of them. Like, for example, Tony Chopper. Chopper's backstory is only known to Nami. That's the only person who was told about what Chopper went through when growing up. Frankie backstory, I don't believe, was ever mentioned to Luffy. Brook never specified exactly what happened to him. He just talks about the closeness he has with Laboon. I don't believe Sanji talked about his backstory. Zoro never talked about his backstory. And then Luffy adamantly chose not to listen to Nami's backstory. He, even when his sister was about to explain what happened to her, Luffy got up and left. And then that was a dope moment because of the fact that it was like, yeah, I don't need to learn about the bad shit that happened to her for me to want to help her. I want to help her because she's my friend, period. And that's the kind of character that Luffy is. So having it to where he gets these impromptu sessions with everyone so he can listen to the sadness that they went through doesn't do anything. And again, because it's like you need this character to explain their backstory, but you're emphasizing exactly when and why and how they're explaining their backstory rather than let the shit progress naturally like it does in the source material. You just try to give like a position where it's like, hey, Sanji's right here cooking right now, and it's like Zeph told me about being a captain. It was like, Zeph was a captain, and it was like, wow, what? And he's like, yeah, and it was like, so, like, you be on this crew? Not exactly. Backstory. And it's like, what the fuck? So, this is where I have to draw a line in the sand. This was the only part in the entire series that I could say was done with actually some type of correctness as far as the source material goes, and that is Sanji's backstory. Is the only thing they did to where they changed a minimal amount of stuff that was okay. The things that they did do was actually fine. For the first time ever, the child actor that they got was actually competent. The kid was great. Like, he was fucking great. And then they had the entirety of the starvation aspect being done very well. I thought the whole thing was very, very well done. To the point where it only fell apart as soon as it got to the moment that actually, like, the most crucial moment was during the, like, him being starved and then essentially going after Zeph. And with doing that, you kind of fucked up because you had it to where, the kid basically said what it was that he was going to do out loud in the most anime way possible, which didn't make any sense. And he's like, he got all that food, I'm gonna take it from him. If it don't, I'm gonna kill him. And it's like, you didn't need to have him say that. You were perfectly fine showcasing him just looking out in daze, being hungry, seeing all the food wrappers around him, the empty stuff, and then essentially just him looking back, grabbing the knife, and then slowly creeping over towards him, seeing the bag of food, and then him rushing towards it or whatnot, and him like screaming or whatever. And then you easily could have just had it to where Zeph was just ignoring what he was doing and just kind of yelling, like, I told you don't come over here unless you see a boat. And then you just have the breakdown of when Sanji saw that his leg was cut off and that the fact that he ate his own leg in order for him to survive because he didn't have no food. He gave Sanji all the food and everything. And they basically were out there for over 80 fucking days. And that, and then essentially you just have it to where Zeph just kind of equates to him or just lets him understand and know. And it was like, no, it was like, I wasn't gonna let you die. I wasn't, and it's like not really pushing the whole dream thing because again, that's what the series does and it's really bad. But you had Zeph essentially say that his dream was to go see the All Blue, and since Sanji stated that his dream was to see the All Blue, he didn't want to let him die because they both share the same dream, and it's the stupidest fucking thing imaginable. Even though the reason that the Barati exists is because that's Zeph's dream. Zeph's dream was to have a restaurant to go around and help people and give them food, so that essentially the situation that they're in would never really fucking happen. So, like, Zeph knew and wanted to see the All Blue, but it wasn't, like, his end goal. But his main thing was, like, there should be a traveling restaurant that feed people when they desperately need it. So, even if you're lost out at sea, you'll know or hear tales of a restaurant that's willing to feed and give anyone food regardless of the situation. And that's what the Barati is supposed to be. That's why it was so welcoming and why Sanji would be so adamant at feeding people who were looking for food, like Ging does when he shows up with the Don Creek pirates, or why Zeph gives them a bag full of food for them to eat regardless of what it is that it might do to them. despite the fact that after they feed them, they decide to attack them. All of those things were like defining key characteristics and dope ass moments. But again, they squandered that shit because they killed Don Krieg early on. But then you have it to where, like I said, just that weird dialogue at the end kind of broke how great that scene was when it was doing Sanji's backstory, because it just kind of had to start talking about dream shit, and it was just kind of like, nah. So, yeah, then it was like, that's when Luffy heard about his backstory, and it was like, whatever. But, then you also had a scene where it was like, again, gotta do that filler for exposition, because, you know, Kobe gay ass just gotta be talking about Kobe. But you had something incredibly dumb done. You had Kobe basically following Garp as if he's like this weird stray dog, which isn't justified in anything. Like, they just keep having scenes with Garp, and then Kobe's right there. But it's like, his second in command isn't connected to him at the hip like that. So why is Kobe constantly following him? He's just a cadet. God damn it. And it's like, it's not like he's even special of a cadet. So it's like, you're forcing this so much, and it's so hard, and it's just so ridiculous. So then you have Garp talking with Mihawk, who was on the ship sitting in his chair and whatnot. And then you have Garp talking to Mihawk. And then the conversation is one of the dumbest parts in this episode. Because Mihawk's, because then Garp asks, where's Luffy? Mihawk specifies that he did not capture Luffy, even though he had every opportunity to do so, and that was the whole point as to why he was there in the first place. And then Garp was like, I gave you an order, and then Mihawk was like, I don't follow orders. And then you just sit there. I had to pause the video to sit there and go, then why the fuck did you go in the first place? If your mind is like this, why do anything at all? Especially if we're now all of a sudden going to follow the source material of Mihawk, who does shit like this all the time. I don't do things unless it brings me any interest, whether or not the government calls me or not. I don't give a fuck. And yet, for some reason, it's like, oh, he's only going to do that after the fact that he actually went there out of his way and wasted time to try and go find Luffy. None of that shit makes any sense. But if you was to have used him the correct way, you wouldn't have that fucking problem. But again, far be it from me to tell you that you're a bad writer, even though you're clearly a really bad fucking writer. So you then have essentially Mihawk also establish that he knows that Luffy is Garp's grandson and that he wants him to go to the Grand Line. And again, none of this makes any fucking sense. And so then Mihawk promptly leaves, to which Garp gets upset, trashes his office, and then Kobe starts to fix up his office for whatever reason. And then later, when we transition back, because again, we only use Kobe as a transition excuse or an exposition dump, right? So then we go back, Kobe still fixing up Garp's office. Garp then establishes that he knows that Kobe's learned that Luffy is his grandson and that he tried to train him as a Marine, but he doesn't want to be a Marine. Whatever. And so then from there, you have Kobe explaining to Garp exactly what kind of person Luffy is. To which Garp promptly responds and was like, yeah, I know Luffy too. What the fuck is your point? And it's like, yes, what the hell is your point? Because you've only known Luffy for like 3 fucking days. And also, you're the same character. Well, because this is after Kobe says, after he's like, I know Luffy too. And he's special. He's not someone that's going to change, because Luffy knows exactly who he is better than anyone. And then Garp was like, and who is he? He's a pirate. To which Garp face kind of scowls at the notion of that, and he gets upset. And it's like, well, yeah, he should. And Kobe is like, and then he's never going to stop being a pirate. And then he's like, so I'm supposed to just let him live his life as a filthy pirate? And Kobe is like, is that so wrong? And here we go with another fucking contradiction in this goddamn show. Did we not just establish in the last episode that Kobe has an issue with the idea of a fucking warlord? Pirates that are allowed to continue pirating or under special privilege by the government themselves. And now you're telling a vice admiral whose grandson just decided to become a pirate that hasn't done anything yet, hasn't made himself noticeable as a pirate that needs to be hunted down, or hasn't done anything illegal that is of worth for the Navy to actually focus on, for even though he started off trying to become a pirate, that you should give up trying to change his mind in doing so, because would it really be that bad if he was a pirate? You're the same character who sat there and said, pirates are scum, they're bad, only the Marines are good. And then even finding out other shit about the world, you still promptly believe that the Marines are the good guy. Even when meeting Luffy again, you then establish halt in the name of the Navy because of the fact that you're a Marine, he's a pirate, and you cannot condone his actions. So why now are you changing your opposition for Luffy? Nothing has happened to let this become, to let this be a moment. Like nothing has happened. And then this leads into another scene where they have another transitional dump, because again, bad writing, where Garp basically tells the Marines under him that essentially they're gonna go after Monkey D. Luffy and his crew and they're gonna capture them all. So like, leaves no stone left unturned or whatever. And then Kobe essentially looks kind of scared because it's like, well, now we're gonna see him do it for real rather than fake. And again, just like Luffy hasn't done anything to warrant even a fucking wanted poster yet. He hasn't done anything aside from just calling himself a pirate. He hasn't done anything that is of piracy. He hasn't disobeyed Navy law. He hasn't attacked a Marine yet. He hasn't done anything that just would make it to where, yeah, the Marines would have an issue for him. If anything, he's done far more vigilante shit than he actually done as pirate shit. And so rather than, this shit actually making sense and him finally getting his first bounty after he defeats Arlong, they, for whatever reason, are just kind of doubling down on Garp saying that going after Luffy is actually a good thing and a big deal when it isn't, because Luffy hasn't done anything. And like Luffy, like Garp is so way out of Luffy's pay grade, and it's just so stupid how they keep trying to go about doing this, because they're pushing a character that by all standards should not fucking exist right now. But again, far be it for me to tell you that you're just a terrible fucking writer. Like, I'm pretty sure if it wasn't for the fact that someone was like, yeah, none of these characters are supposed to be in a relationship, they probably would have had Nami hook up with somebody, probably Zoro, and it would have been lame. But this shit is just disturbing. Like, this shit is just unbelievably disturbing. So, the episode itself then concludes by having Arlong show up at the Barati. It's a traveling restaurant. It doesn't make sense for him to be able to know where it is, but apparently the Barati just likes to sit in one place, even though that defeats the purpose of what the Barati is, which is why it's a goddamn ship. Anyway, he shows up there, starts throwing his weight around, and starts acting like a fucking idiot. And so, again, this is one of those things that's like, this kind of doesn't make any sense considering how their world works. Mihawk is currently in this ocean, right? And that's someone you don't fuck with. You also have Garp patrolling the ocean, right? And that's someone Arlong can't fuck with. Yet, we have Arlong going around casually saying that he runs the East Blue to anyone and everyone that'll listen, apparently. And he keeps terrorizing humans. People who are more than capable of contacting the Marines to, tell them to stop. Something along that nature. Like, for him to even go, the Marines even run away when they see my flag. And it's like, yeah, but you're small potatoes. Then you have it to where he's looking for Monkey D. Luffy because he has something that he wants. Are you ready for this, people? Because again, here's one of those dumbass contradictions that just fuck up everything that you have done narratively because you're too stupid. Arlong wants the map to the Grand Line. Fishmen are from the Grand Line. You see, there's an island that only fishmen and mermen come from. It's called the Mermaid Islands. And it is specifically in the Grand Line. It is literally nowhere else. They come from nowhere else but that island. That is the only place that they come from. That's it. That's it. So the fact that Arlong wants a map to the Grand Line makes absolutely no fucking sense. Now, if you was to go, Arlong would want the map so he can become king of the pirates after he traverses the Grand Line. Again, another major factor within One Piece is that every fucking pirate dream isn't to become the king of the pirates. This thing was showcased with Ace. This thing was showcased with Whitebeard. We've seen this with Crocodile. We've seen this with a bunch of different fucking pirates. Their main goal isn't to be the king of the pirates. That's what some of them want, which is what led to the era of pirates, like a brand new pirate era. That's what led to that, was because Gold Roger said that One Piece existed and someone could become the king of the pirates if they traverse the Grand Line. That's it. But to have Arlong also try to become king of the pirates, even though Arlong is supposed to be doing what he's going to do to Cocoa Village, which is why he keeps fucking with Nami, and he basically establishes his own domain as Arlong Park within that island, doing whatever he can while Nami draws up maps, was all in perpetuity towards his position in keeping that power in that location, right? There's a reason he left the Grand Line to come to the East Blue. So having him be in the East Blue, only then for him to be like, I'm looking for a map for the Grand Line, and then he's just establishing his power in the East Blue so he can leave to go to the Grand Line, is so unbelievably fucking retarded. Especially when you also get into the mix of when you find out more shit about the Grand Line, like the fact that there was a lot of territories ran by other warlords. The Mermaid Village currently is under the territory of Whitebeard. Arlong is not a part of the Whitebeard Pirates, but his island is under Whitebeard's territory. So you understand exactly how fucking stupid you gotta be to take these very, very normal situations and concepts that are basically mentioned in passing by characters that exist in the source material to establish and allow everything that your story needs them to transpire, and then you completely do the opposite because for some reason you have this dumbass notion that if you were to follow the source material, some people might think that you're copying, even though by making an adaptation, you're doing just that. This is unbelievably stupid. And having Arlong wanting to get a map of the Grand Line is just so goddamn dumb. And again, this only adds on to how bad this show actually is. So from there, you have it to where Luffy and Arlong fight, to which you have an issue because of the fact that, again, we're still doing the same dumb shit where Luffy apparently just gets super weak when he gets wet, rather than that's not what happens. He can't swim, like, because there's multiple times in One Piece where Luffy fights and he's completely covered in water. Hell, he actually gets saved a couple of times because he's covered in water. And it's not like it's just specifically seawater that has to do this. And it's like, no, you're doing it to where it's like, oh, if he gets in water, he just loses all strength and he can't fight. That's not how that works. It's not how that works at all. That's not how that works with Devil Fruit users at all. It literally is like that would like their strength will get sapped away because of Sea Prism Stone, but seawater does not make them weak. There's like water does not make them weak. It just Sea Prism Stone can make them weak, but they can't swim when they're actually submerged in the ocean. That's it. They just can't swim. You sink like a brick. You can't swim. So by ruining that in order to basically justify Luffy essentially getting weak near the end of the fight, you have him fighting Arlong and essentially the fight itself kind of going south. It's the same thing happening when you have Sanji in a fit of rage after Zeph got hit, trying to kick and fight the merman that hit him, whom he later basically gives the combo out of his life to. Essentially just kind of one hit punches Sanji and it just kind of like he's out. When again, doesn't make any sense because later on in your series, you're going to have them defeat these characters, but you're not justifying how they're going to be able to defeat these characters if there's nothing that they do that essentially would give them a fucking power boost, right? So these characters going about fighting early on only to then lose, to then show up later, to then win, makes no sense because it doesn't come from nothing. This is a typical thing in Western writing because you get superheroes who do dumb shit like this all the time. It's like they get their asses kicked and they come back for the final bout and then they're able to win. But again, bad writing is still bad writing because sometimes you have it to where the superhero now knows the weakness of the bad guy, or they're able to figure out the chink in their armor, or like exactly what it is, the flaw that they have that they can exploit so they can win now that they couldn't do earlier. Think of Kung Pao with the little triangles on Betty trying to rip them off of them. But with One Piece, you literally have it to where it's like they're just going. Like he literally just fought, lost, and now they're going to go back to fight again. But how? Like how does he expect to win now? What exactly changed? What was the significance of that? You see, in the anime, Luffy never sees Arlong until he first fights him. Then he promptly beats Arlong. And then Luffy, at that same strength level, continues on his journey and never really catches an L until at least the Enies Lobby arc. Even after a multitude of different things happen, you have other characters established and realize that there's different ways of fighting Luffy in order for them to hurt him. One of the first people who did that was Buggy, where he established and realized even though you're made out of rubber, you can still be cut. And Buggy got a bunch of fucking knives, and to which they promptly fight. So now that you're having it to where literally a moment when Luffy is like, yeah, I didn't know people like you were this strong. I need to get stronger. So I got to amp up my game in fighting, which is something he only does to Rob Lucci. You're no way near Rob Lucci. You have no justification behind any of the things that you're going to do next. you can't really have it to where Sanji all of a sudden now is just going to become a stronger kicker when we're already supposed to have established that Sanji was a stronger kicker and a better fighter than like the mermen themselves. And so even though despite Arlong's basically opposition towards humans and his racism towards them and thinking that they're inferior to mermen, you have these humans actually defeat the fishmen. Hell, Zoro damn near kills almost all of the fishmen at Arlong Park while Arlong and a couple of his people are away. And it pisses him off. But it also was one of those things where it's like, this only happened because Zoro was injured. And it's like, if he wasn't injured, like he probably would be able to kill everybody. But he was injured, so that did put a staunch in what it was that was going on. But again, this is not equating that correctly. So again, you can't really justify their involvement in dealing with Arlong because of the fact that realistically they can't deal with Arlong. Luffy already lost to him. Zoro was weakened. Sanji couldn't defeat one of them with kicking, and you know Usopp can't do shit. So how do you justify this? And again, you're also not going to have a moment of Usopp nutting up and actually giving in to fighting because of the fact that, like I said previously, you didn't allow Usopp to develop as a character correctly, so you're not giving him that moment in which he would do something out of pocket in order for him to help that would just involve him cleverly being able to defeat somebody. Because of the fact that it's like, I might be scared, but I am still part of the crew, and I'm still going to do something because my friends need help. You see how, because of your lack of character development, your lack of involvement, and your inability to write correctly, you've basically shunned and stopped any type of natural progression that comes within the series that makes this shit actually endearing and makes sense in the long run. It's unbelievably fucking stupid that this is still going, or that people essentially are praising this series, because it has absolutely nothing going on for it that deserves any of that recognition. So yeah, I'll say it again. This is, if not worse, just as bad as the Cowboy Bebop live action. Netflix should be ashamed of themselves, and any person who claims that they're a fan of One Piece that enjoys this, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about.